be ancient.
That's true. I am ancient. I am eternal. There's a thumbs up in the back.
Was that a thumbs up? Okay. All right, let's roll. We're only 3 minutes late. We nailed it, everybody. Thank you again for being here. I'm Little Red Dot. I will be your panel moderator for the day. I am the Twitch producer and content creator for Kobold Press. If you are here, I assume that you're a freelancer because this is Freelancing 201. If this is not your classroom, well, you can stay if you'd like because I'm not taking roll call. I am so excited to be able to bring this panel. We did a 101 at PAX this last year, and it was one of our most popular panels. And we had so many questions that were kind of about next step in freelance. Not how to get started, but what if I'm already freelancing and I want to take it to the next level, or I need some really great advice. So this panel has a slew of very talented people of our industry, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But we'll also have a Q&A. This room I don't think is big enough where you have to have a mic or anything. We'll do kind of show of hands when I start calling for questions. So we are going to open the floor up, so get your questions ready. That will happen at the end of the panel. I think that's it. Let's go ahead and go around. I'm just gonna go left down the table. So you're up, Demi.
Hey y'all, my name is Danny. You can find me all over the internet as Brutal Dan. I'm the community manager for Roll20, and I'm also the community director for Free RPG Day.
Hello, it is I, B-Day Walters. I say words about things. You can find me all over the interwebs, wherever fine streaming content can be located. Lead designer of Into the Motherlands, and a bunch of other stuff. Really I'm the shadow to Diana's Peter Pan.
I was about to say, I'm here because I'm the #1 B-Day Walters stan, but...
those two states are not necessarily contradictory.
Hi guys, I'm Diana DiMicco, so I'm the head of communications, marketing, and our community over at Die Hard Dice. I also run Bard and Barbarian with my husband, and I'm the official World of Darkness bimbo for Renegade Games.
Yeah.
There can be only one, though. You gotta...
Hello, I'm Friday, and I am a professional full-time game master. Currently, my full-time game, I also do YouTube, and sometimes I do shows for Kobold Press. And I also do writing projects and TTRPG projects, but that's,
Just more freelance.
Brush them off, yeah.
Awesome. As you can see, we have a eclectic group that comes from a variety of aspects of this industry, from writing to producing to now working for companies where they're hiring freelancers. So today, all of these people up here are going to give you their advice and answer your questions, but please note, their advice is not the be-all, end-all, and we are not legal professionals, so please don't sue us in case things go bad and you take our advice, Kate. So let's get started. I'm going to ask a couple questions and kind of kick off the conversation. Hopefully it will spur some questions from you and spur some more questions for us. So I could start with how long have you been in the industry, but I think a way more interesting question for people that have been freelancing is, when did you know you were a freelancer? When did you start using that word to describe maybe some of the work that you were doing?
I think for me it was when a company, so I used to create content just for board gaming stuff, and I think for me it was when a company was like, hey, can you invoice us? And I was like, ooh, I get to invoice. And that was kind of like my learning process of like, oh, I get to set my prices. So that's when I got that email of, hey, can you sign this? Can you send us a contract? That was like when I was like, oh, I can, keep pushing forward.
Oh, you ready for me?
I do this for you.
She did that very expectantly. She's just like, it's just because I have an opinion on literally everything. For me, I define when you know you're a freelancer is the same time when you know you're a professional, which is when you've been paid. If you've been paid for a gig one time, you've already made it. Like, you've crossed the biggest hump. Everything else is just scaling upwards.
For me, it was the moment of sheer shock and awe when someone was like, okay, and here's how much we're going to pay you to run this game. I was like, oh, you do that? So I think that's how I kind of got there. And I was like, oh, that makes me a professional, because now this is profession.
Yeah.
When I signed my first writer's contract for a TTRPG book, and I saw that I had a deadline, and I was like, I got a deadline.
So it seems like the word I heard out of all of your mouths was contract, money, and invoice. Those seem like 3 really important key things to this process of the next step of freelancing, at least in this industry. So, how do you go about finding out what your price is, what your value is, and how do you put that forward to a company in which may not want to pay or that you need to negotiate with?
So negotiation is always the hardest part because you never know what a person intends to spend. Like, let's say if they want to spend $1,000 and I'll say I'll do it for $500, I've talked myself out of $500. But if they've got $1,000 and I say I want $1,500, I've now talked myself out of the gig. So the way that I always say, because people approach me constantly, and the range in which I do things, of course, varies wildly. Like, obviously, what I charge Netflix is not what I charge most people. So the question I always ask is, what's the budget? And then when you ask them what's the budget, always realize no one ever leads with their best offer right out of the gates. So what you say, what's the budget? If they were like, we were thinking this much, if you're happy with that number, just be like, dope, because that will help build up your cachet of being easy to work with. Or you can always be like, I was thinking more like, and then just bump it like 10%. You'd be shocked how often people would just say yes. And I will say one other thing. Statistically speaking, in this country, women are far less likely to negotiate than men. So push back always, because you know what you're worth. Ask for it, you'll get it.
Yep.
I also think it's important to recognize that you can ask other people who are doing this what they get paid. And the nice thing about the TTRPG space and board games in general is people are very willing to sort of foster in new growth and new ideas and new people. So I ask B-Dave constantly, hey, I have to do a rewrite for this. It's a rush fee. What would you recommend I charge for that? So I'm constantly pulling B-Dave and other publishers and TTRPG writers. The more people that you can kind of get in touch with and see, okay, you know, maybe $200 a session isn't out of scale with what other people are asking. It'll kind of give you an idea of what you value your time at in relationship to the rest of the space too.
And adjacent to that, if you're not dealing with a professional company that has a normal rate or anything like that, then I normally give them a range. I give them my most expensive range, and then I give them like my mid-range. I never go my low range. And then I tell them that it really depends on what exactly you want me to do, because then it's going to change the prices, so that I am including the price that I am comfortable giving them no matter what.
I would also add on to that, the culture, especially in this country, of not discussing what you're paid is expressly for companies to exploit you. That is the sole purpose for it, so yeah.
And to piggyback off of Friday, like, remember, if they reduce the price, you can reduce your scope. So that negotiation part, keep that in mind. Like, if you give them your price and they say, oh, we can only do 500, take that back with you and say, okay, I can do this for 500. Like, it's okay to kind of have that back and forth and negotiate that way.
And if you end up at a space where it's a hard no for, you know, your labor and energy, absolutely tell that company why. This is still so new and it's still developing in such a way that, you know, if $500 isn't worth your time to do a project, if you were given that full rundown of, we want 6 episodes for $500, here's your task, you have to run 3 hours every week, tell them, well, I only run 2-hour days and that really isn't in scale with how I charge for my time, but here's what I would do for, like Danny said, for $500, and here's what you would need to pay someone to get what you're actually asking for. It's a two-way information street.
Yeah.
I will say, curveball, part of the reason why I made it as far as I did, as fast as I did, is I willingly agreed to some things that I knew were bad deals. But I was like, this is gonna get me to the next one, so, you know, don't let people walk on you, but there's times that you're like, I fully comprehend I'm getting about 1/3 of the market right now, because the gig after next, I'll be able to push it up. So.
Sure, step on me, Daddy.
Yes.
I dominate, I do not suck. Yes. I think it's the right panel. Yeah.
I should go.
But, you know, I think that's a really important conversation about value, right? When you're looking at your freelance jobs, some are going to be valued based on pay scale, and then some may be valued on, is it a stepping stone? Is it a next step? And that's kind of on you to figure out based on your goals, which I think is actually leads to my kind of next question, which is, when we look at becoming a sustainable freelancer, I know what a concept, sustainability in our life. How do you build sustainability and figure out where your goals are? How do you set those for yourself and then attempt to achieve them? Because I imagine you don't just wake up every day, you gotta have some kind of goal. skills.
Well, like in the pro DM space, for instance, people ask me a lot, like, what should I charge? And I say, okay, you got to ask yourself, how much money do you want to make? Then how many sessions do you want to run? Then how many players do you want to have? Divide, divide, divide. Now you've got your number. Then you got to ask yourself, can you command that number? Yes or no? And then do whatever you have to do to build your way up to it. So it's the same with all of these things, you know.
I mean, I think that one of the big things that you can really do in terms of sustainability is planning ahead and be looking for opportunities 3 months, 6 months, 12 months in the future, which is something that, you know, it takes a minute to learn. I'm not going to lie to you guys. You know, I don't know what's happening 24 hours from now, so 3 months is a bit of a stretch, but that was a big stepping stone for me, saying, okay, well, I can quit this day job that is slowly killing me and focus solely on the freelance TTRPG stuff.
So to give the opposite advice as B-Day Walters normally gives, where he recommends you build up months and months of 3 months rent and everything that you need for your expenses. Don't do what I did. I basically quit my job as soon as I made as much as I did freelancing at my regular job. I can't take this anymore. But yeah, so building up a different vertical. So if you're looking at, you have to look at all of your skills as you become a freelancer. And the easiest way to scale is not to scale in one vertical, and by vertical I mean like skill, trade, or something that you're provided. It's the easiest way to do that is if you are both a writer and you're a producer, and you're providing consulting, and you're doing YouTube videos, which bring in net revenue, which takes a while, but you know, and then you're also running professional games on the side. So something like what I do, running professional games on the side, is really a part-time job for most people, but it's still going to get you experience in TTRPG, connect you with people working in the industry, and it's a good vertical for you to be able to transition full-time without like going all in professional GM, for instance.
My best advice is to protect your time and be mindful of how much time you're actually putting in, especially if you're putting out all these leads with freelance. You don't imagine how much, or maybe you don't realize how much time you're actually putting out there trying to get these jobs, booking these gigs. If you're able to track that and set like, okay, I'm only going to be doing emails for an hour this morning, make sure you try to respect your own time, because you can burn out and all of a sudden you're working 18-hour days because you're putting out leads, but then you have to edit this project and then you have to write. So I hate spreadsheets, I really do. Even if you have like a notes app on your phone or an easy way to track, just be like, okay, I spent 3 hours today just sending Twitter DMs, seeing if I can do this project, like maybe I can scale back or scale forward. So that's an easy way to kind of look at empirical data of like, okay, am I spending too much time on something that I don't need to? And also sleep, make sure you sleep.
Yes.
Just add, do what?
Yeah, what is that word?
Sleep.
We get it, Enid, you're undead.
I have no concept of this. I will just say one other thing. To the best of your ability, as fast as you can, start working on your own stuff. Don't wait for the phone to ring. You create your own thing. Create your own projects, write your own stuff, even if it's something you just got to be chopping away at the side, because volume is what will help sustain you, because stuff takes time, stuff gets delayed, stuff gets canceled. It's like cooking a big Thanksgiving dinner. You have lots of things going at once, because so something's always ready.
Yeah, that's actually so diversify income streams, which I think is really important, right? One thing is great, but many things can be even better. But then figuring out how to prioritize those things in a way where you're not taking advantage of yourself is important. But I love what you just said, which is cash flow is a strange thing when you're a freelancer. And in this industry, especially when you're publishing, I know I've found that sometimes they don't meet their deadlines. I just got done with a project that was supposed to be done 1.5 years ago, and they turned in final manuscript before we came to GenCon today. So I've been waiting on that paycheck for almost 2 years, right? So I think that is really sound advice from B-Day, which is start cooking your Thanksgiving dinner and have pieces everywhere so that sustainably you don't get hung up when one person or one group pushes and doesn't make something in the timeline you thought.
Not to get too into the nitty gritty, but when you're doing these contracts, you might see words like net 30, net 60, net 90. You can put those into your contracts and really don't feel bad pushing to the company and say, hey, the contract said net 30, it's 28 days, I haven't heard anything, can you update
consequences too. That's the key.
Yep.
If they say net 60 and they aren't paying you in 60, there's got to be something. Otherwise,
Well, this is why contracts exist, right? Contracts exist to protect people on both sides of an agreement. So, you know what, let's actually talk about contracts, because I think it's something, we are not legal professionals, everybody, that's not what we're here for, but we can tell you at least from the point of signing them and negotiating them. So contracts, what do you look for in a good contract? Ones that make you feel comfortable, and then what are these red flags that you need to see in contracts when they start being passed off to you?
I can tell you for us, well, I mean, I'll give you two answers. When I'm just freelancing, I look at the money, I look at the how long it's gonna pay, and exactly what they're asking for. Because usually it'll be itemized down to the, like Wizards of the Coast, it's like this many tweets, this many YouTube appearances, like it's in there. I find for the most part, as long as you're at least active, most legit people aren't terribly pedantic about that. They're not like, you tweeted 4 times in the contract, so you're fine.
I'm so gonna do that to you now.
I mean, I just do it so you'll show me attention. But what I realized, like Into the Motherlands, we're going back and forth with a publisher right now, and they snuck in a lot of very vague language about rights and ownership. That's what you got to keep an eye on. And there was uncomfortably vague stuff, and they're like, well, we all know what we mean. I'm like, no, fuck that. What does the contract say? You know what I mean? Because you might mean it, but you might sell this company. You might die. You know what I mean? And the next person is only going to come to what's written on the paper. And it's not about trust. It's like what Dot was saying. It's for everybody's protection. Exactly what is this?
So I have both sides of experience on this, because Dot knows in my job at Die Hard, I write and send out and work with a lot of contracts. And so I will say that sometimes that very ambiguous language is to the benefit of everyone involved, but it really needs to be clarified, and it's probably not the case with most TTRPG companies. The big thing that I was going to say is ownership rights. That's something that I wish I'd looked out for like way earlier in my career. It's something I hadn't thought of until very recently. But exclusivity clauses too. So we are a very small space, all things considered. I mean, everybody knows each other. We all work together in some capacity. We all have some kind of connection. So if you're working with, let's say, Die Hard Dice, and they say
Die Hard Dice?
the Die Hard Dice, and let's say that in the contract you were presented with, it said you cannot work with any other dice manufacturer or TTRPG accessory company. You just alienated so many resources that are available to you as a creator of some kind and as a freelancer, that I always look out for that now, because it's a big icky feeling for me.
Yeah, exclusivity should be expensive.
Thank you. I've only ever had one person that's like, you're going to be exclusive. I was like, well, then you're going to pay me this much, because I'm now losing every other opportunity this year, right? That's a great point.
Yeah, working for publishers too, like they might say commercial rights. Ask about that, because that means they can use you for advertisements, and your face is going to be like wherever they put it. So make sure you charge for that, or if you're okay with that they're not just using it for socials. So know which mediums that they're going on.
And the words "with approval."
Oh,
Big,
yes.
big important. They're gonna like pull some 10-year-old Facebook photo of you with your hand up your nose, and they're gonna put that on the side of it.
Or they'll take a picture out of context entirely for it, and you're like, oh my god, nobody was ever supposed to see that. Yeah, absolutely. And those are things like right in the negotiation process. If you find the contract is fine, except it lacks this with approval, simply say this contract, please put with approval at the end of that sentence. That's part of the back and forth of negotiation.
And do not sign it until it is perfect. I don't care what they tell you.
Yeah, it better be exactly like you want it. So I'm already seeing some hands, which I think means it's now a great time for some questions. And the first one is this gentleman back here, yeah?
Actually, I'm a lawyer and I'm intellectual.
Oh, great, okay.
Hey.
Hey, yeah, okay.
I can get another chair up here.
I don't want to take folks with you, but I just want to say, look for one thing when you're looking about ownership rights, look for these 3 words. There's a word made for hire.
Work made for hire, just so the mic can hear it.
Yeah, work made for hire. It has to be written in the contract. It is work made for hire, and it falls under a certain category, which I'm not going to go into. And then the company will own it, no matter what you do on it. So if you're working on something by yourself, like you were saying, and then you use that with the company, and there's a word made for hire, the entire thing.
All of it. So good to know.
That's what I wanted to get across. The second thing is indemnity clauses. Are you going to discuss that? Okay. So they'll discuss that in a little bit, but if you don't have that, if they're making you indemnify them, then you want more money.
Yes.
All right, I'll shut up now.
Usually I say to look at a contract, and if it has a ton of clauses, you probably need to ask for more money. Because every one of those clauses are now limiting you down. It's tearing you down into the process, which is okay because again, it can mean a lot of security as long as they're meeting it. So the more clauses, the more money you should probably be asking for.
We'll just say as an aside too, the company wanting to own everything is not at all unusual, especially if it's an existing IP that they're bringing you in on.
Correct.
You know, like
I agree that it's not unusual.
Yeah. So something to look for. Thank you very much for that question.
Yeah, how would you, either making your own contracts or negotiating contracts, how would you include in the word a morality clause? Or if they're start using your stuff for things that do not reflect good upon you as a creator?
Oh, that's interesting.
I have a fire and brimstone clause in all of my contracts where it explicitly says if you do something that's against this code of conduct, again, explicitly stated, we cut all ties with you, you cut all ties with us. And we give them the same opportunity. So if we do something that they're against, they can cut ties with no harm, no foul.
It's great. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. My question is, with all this talk of extra pay and everything, if one is just beginning to dip their toe or take the plunge into freelance work, how much should one expect to be paid at that very beginning of the long uphill climb?
this is something to be mindful of, and I tell people all the time too. Diana's previous point, everybody's previous point. It's a small pool, and let's call a spade a spade. People know what they got to pay me to get me, and if you're asking for what they got to pay me, then they're gonna be like, why are we gonna hire you? You know. So it's a sliding scale, and to the previous point, like you just got to decide. There's so many gigs that I did for like $50. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that I'm
absolutely.
like, this is like overtly a screw job, but
Charge what you need to stay alive.
exactly.
Like charge what you need.
Or charge what you need to get to the next level. Like I don't think, it is not that it isn't possible to just dive headlong into going full time. Like for me, I was working a full-time job when I was beginning to create content. For the most part, streaming and development and stuff is a nights and weekends job, for the most part. There was a huge company layoff, and so I was still looking for work, but I just had more time, and so I just started doing more things. And then I just looked up one day, and I was like, oh, I'm making enough money to just do this, okay? And that was that. I would never advise anybody to just jump in, because you have to be able to enjoy the process, because it is going to take a while. It's going to take longer than you think. And if you're waiting by the phone for that check that's 2 years delayed, it is just a very stressful, not fun existence.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, versus when just something's always happening. I will also say, things come in like booms and busts.
Yep.
You know, like I'd make like 230 grand a year, right? More or less, 250. But that comes in like big ass bursts, you know what I mean? Where it's like in 12 days I've made 80 grand, and then like nothing for like 4.
I was gonna say, that's the actor lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Which is like you do the one job and it pays out high, but now you've got 3 months of no work.
Yep.
Which is why you want 3 months in that bank, right?
Why you want 3 months in the bank and just have different things going, you know what I mean? So, but to your exact point, I think I can tell you what I did. Where I would ask, and there was many times that again, people were like, literally, we got like 2 cents a word, which is again, criminal. But I asked myself consciously, is it worth it to be able to say my name was on this project? Because there are ways, while exposure largely is garbage, artists die from exposure, there is something to be said for you being able to negotiate a certain rate when all you've got is talent and vibes, and I believe in you, I know you're brilliant. Versus I've got talent, vibes, and these 10 credits.
So I should take that off my resume, is what you're saying.
No, but cite me as a reference.
Then we're cool.
Talent.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Talent vibes.
Cost is-
DVD Walters.
Remember, cost is what, like the pay, like that's the money. Yes, we love money, but value is what you're gonna get from both sides. So So remember that, and I'm a firm believer if you keep accepting clients at like $50 a stream, you're gonna keep getting those $50 a stream. So, also like after this, raise your rates, because a lot of artists, writers, every year if you work a corporate job, you're getting a pay raise. Artists never think about like, oh, I need to raise my rates. So if y'all could just raise your rates, even if it's $5, $10, dip your toes in as you build that resume, as you go from vibes to super vibes and credits, like you'll be super fast.
I like it.
Adjacent of these points here, in the professional gaming space, as soon as your game starts filling at your rate, you open up another game, your rate goes up.
Every time.
Because that means that people are willing to pay your current rate, and that means that your value is so high that you cannot accept that many customers anymore. Like there's a limited amount of people that I can run D&D for. It's 60. So I run 10 to 12 games a week, but I have a cap. There's a ceiling for me. So that means my rates are just raised every quarter because I have so many clients. I can't take in more people to roll dice with, unfortunately. So that just means people that are willing to stay are getting more play with.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of misinformation too when it comes to like pay and raising your pay, and that's actually due to our society telling us that we're not valuable enough, right? So when you start doubting yourself, oh, I can't raise my GM rates because what if I lose customers? Trust me, you won't. You'll actually get more people and continue to be able to pay yourself more.
And you won't miss them.
And you won't miss. And as horrible as that is, just business. And that's sometimes the hardest thing for a freelancer to realize is you just entered a business. You are now a business person. You run a personal business, and because of that, sometimes you gotta pull your feels out of it and go right to the core of it, which is if it's selling out, supply and demand says raise the price.
Mark.
I also think it's a valuable thing to say that, you know, we see the screenshots on Twitter and all of that of these artists and freelancers and everybody getting the whole, well, I would never pay that much for this service or this thing. Okay, well, leave.
Well, that's you, right, that's you. But there will be people that do. So give yourself a little credit and remind yourself that you are worth it. You're valuable.
And if you can't stand up for yourself, send them to me. I'll do it.
I think too, there is a lot of value in one thing that we haven't really discussed, which is networking, in knowing people. I would say it is
I literally would not be here were it not for B-Day Walters, period, end of story.
Stop it.
You know it's
Stop
true.
it. But I love you. It is equal to, also possibly greater than, even your talent, that people know you and they know your talent and what you're good for. And so there's definitely a time too where you have people, companies that may be starting out, as long as they're being honest with you, you know, like again, there have been plenty of things where it's like we're only paying $50 because we only can pay $50, but you know, consciously together, side by side, we will grow. And as your project has grown, I've grown with you in parallel.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds so bougie even for me when I say it.
Oh boy.
But sometimes I get contacted for things, and if the rate is too low, it's like I would almost rather do it for free than do it for this rate. You know what I mean? I'm like, you know what? I'll just do it this afternoon. There you go. Donate the money. Fine. It's fine. You're adorable.
That's so kind of you. Now we have some questions on this side of the room. I want to make sure I got to them. Yeah.
So when it came time to draft your own contracts, did you spend money or have like a consultation with a lawyer, or was it more like looking at templates online? What was the process for like getting that first contract together?
I did a cut and paste, like a freaking ransom letter.
I did not. Little known to most people in the United States, sorry for anybody that's not here, every state has government funds that go to pro bono lawyers. Wow. And most of these pro bono lawyers or they're looking for pro bono work, and they go through these state, like I know we have one in Atlanta called Georgia Lawyers for the Arts. And that's what they do. These lawyers are looking to do pro bono work, and they sit down with you for a single hour to consult, whether that's filing your LLC paperwork, whether that's writing up a contract for you, or whatever it is. But they look to help businesses, small businesses, artists, or people entering a freelance. But yeah, I would say I went to a legal professional because I wanted my shit on lock and key. So.
But yes, there are tons of templates. There's services like Wrapbook that you
Yes.
can pay for, and you can get it, and you can have it all.
Yep, that's another great. Yeah, there are ways like if you want to pay from home where you can get contracts that have already been reviewed by legal professionals that you can kind of look into.
It's definitely worthwhile as you're setting up your beginning paperwork, for sure. To make sure that you are protected with, as a freelancer, you're going to be working with a lot of different companies, and you want to make sure that you as an individual and as a business are protected should something go awry with those companies. And the type of business that you set up is going to be important in dictating what you are liable for if something goes off
Yep,
the rails.
absolutely. And you'll get to a point, like I've just hit the point where I'm doing enough now where I need limited liability, and so I filed an LLC. So a large part of my freelance work is no longer on my personal shoulders. Like they can't come take my cat and my car if things go really bad for me. They can only take what my business has. So there is a point where there's like a cusp kind of changeover for you. You just have to figure out when that is and when you're ready to take on, if you want to take on that responsibility for your freelance work. Oh, another question. Yes. And then we're gonna go here and then back there. Yeah. Yes, you.
So it seems like, feel free to not answer this.
Oh.
What is the thing that haunts you that happened with the choices you made or the mistakes that you made along the way
Okay.
from starting out in the time period we're talking about?
Literally nothing. Because everything was a learning opportunity. Even if it went poorly, it's like, oh, I'll do this differently. Like I wouldn't change a thing.
I think it's that, yes. Also recognize that, again, we are still in an industry that is growing and changing and involving more people. It kind of exploded over the course of the pandemic. So as much as you might be struggling as an individual working with companies, the company is probably struggling to understand what their responsibility is with you. So I think that, the biggest thing that I've taken away from 4 years now is ask when you need something and don't be scared to open up communications about the things that make you uncomfortable.
Yes.
I would say the biggest thing for me was not starting sooner. And a lot of what I learned to do, honestly, was just by starting on YouTube and like YouTubing stuff. And then, and then just going from there. Ted's nodding because, big camera guy check there.
Thanks, camera guy Ted.
Ted, are you on YouTube? No way.
Yeah. Follow Nerd. It's just getting out there and like trying new things, because a lot of the time what a team really misses is just someone willing to do the work to learn how to do things. And a lot of the time you're the best person for that job, nobody knows how to do it because you're the one willing to learn. So there's not like a high ceiling for entering a team to learn how to do things, as long as you're working with other amateurs, and then from there you can move on to better paying gigs.
I would say I turned down writing projects when I was doing YouTube because I'm like, no, I'm a video creator. So like, I guess it doesn't haunt me, but I could have been writing and getting work and experience writing rather than just trying to pigeonhole myself on YouTube. And that goes for all of social media too, is learn how to repurpose your content. Whatever, social media is you film a video for YouTube, cut it on TikTok, post it on Twitter, and then onto your Instagram stories, and then stream it live on Twitch. So make sure that you feel okay diversifying. So maybe you're not able to be on the stream, but you can produce it. Or when B. Dave said, like, you're making these connections throughout. If they say no for a project, they might be reaching out and saying, hey, we saw you over here. We can't have you on the panel, but can you do production? So keep that in mind too. Keep your lanes open and try not to have those blinders on.
That kind of flexibility is super valuable too. That's something that people want, it's helpful.
I mean, between when I started talking to G4, it was 6 months till the show started. Netflix was almost a year, But one thing I just want to say, just kind of as an aside, as a freelancer too, one of the things that is your responsibility is if you are struggling, if you are having difficulty, if you're running late, speak up.
Yeah.
Do not wait till the end to be like, whoops, not done. I mean, if you're like, I'm not on pace for this, start discussing possibly an extension earlier, or if they come at you and they're like, no, this is the drop dead date, we must have it, then everybody can adjust their expectations. But do speak up. As somebody who has, again, walks on both sides of these things, when you have a deadline and you're like, all right, give it to me, and then they're like, oh, but my grandmother's been sick, and I'm like, she gets sick today though? You know, like, I'm like, how long have you known this? Also, are you lying?
Yeah.
So, yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah, I second that. Like a sheer set of honesty in the freelancing, because most of the time you're actually signed a contract with somebody that has been there. That was also at one point probably a freelancer and got to that point by doing exactly what you're doing right now. And it screws it up for you and them if you're just not real about timeline or an issue or something. The best experiences I've ever had is when I was just completely transparent. That's like, yo, that stat block is not going to be done today. It's not, or whatever it was I was working on or writing or producing. So I think that's a very, very valuable piece of information, which is just be transparent, because you would want the company to be transparent with you.
And they won't hire you again for anything if you drop the ball with your notice.
Yeah, it's better to be transparent and late than to lie and be late, because then they're never going to hire you again.
And they'll tell other people too. Yeah.
Yes, and that's part of the networking thing too, right? Which is the experience you bring is going to get passed along, and then other people will stop networking with you because they don't want to hire you. So to answer your question, the only thing, regret's a hard thing because we learn from our mistakes. I'm a firm believer in that. But I actually learn a lot more from other people's mistakes. Like in reality, I learn a lot more from other people's mistakes. And so when I take a freelance contract with somebody else that's leading the group or a company that's doing it, oftentimes they do things that I'm like, ooh, I will never do that, right? Like I want to make note of, oh, they really got us information way too late for us to even be able to turn around to the deadline. Or, oh, this was really icky the way they handled this. Or I didn't like the way they didn't create a creative space for us to collaborate. So what I do is I look at other people, I recognize my value to them and how they make me feel. And if I don't actually feel good in the work that I'm doing, or don't feel safe in the work that's being done, or just don't want to work for them again, usually at the end I go, why? Why don't I want to do that again? And then I can kind of pick out and piece, and then I add them to a tally of like, these are things that I will do better or not do, period. So yeah, that would be, don't look at your own mistakes, look at other people's mistakes. So there's my advice to you. We had a, yes, question in the gloves, yes.
So I'm what I guess you would call kind of obvious freelancing right now. I do mostly like one-off, projects or stuff that isn't being part of a bigger publication. And part of that is, I was referenced before, is with the, you networking with others in the industry. And I tend to started from just a couple of years ago on, from the ground up. And how exactly is it that you would start with getting into, like a real company publication rather than just doing one-off projects that, just an individual is, wanting to work for?
I mean, again, the hardest part is so many of these things, there's not a cattle call. There's not a posting somewhere.
Yeah.
So I will tell you, I've had this exact interaction 100 times. We need a new cameraman. All right, get Tommy. Tommy? Had a bad experience with Tommy. What about Susan? Susan's dope, get Susan. That's it. There is no going to their LinkedIn. There is no checking their reel. It's who has top of mind awareness. And when you or I was like, I'll call and be like, hey, Diane, I want to work on this thing. Who do you know? She's like, oh, Emily, Mason, Justice. Dope, here it is. So this is why I talk about it. It is not just important to know people, but also what they know you for.
Yeah.
And the way you start doing that is you have places like this where you can meet people, you can press the flesh, but social media is very useful for that. Start commenting on people's posts, interacting in their communities, talking on Twitch, talking on YouTube, because you'll not just start to meet some of these creators, you will start to meet these creators' fans that are in the same place as you. Do not DM somebody and be like, do you have a job for me? Because the answer is no, I don't, But it all comes along that way. And then as you are creating objectively dope things and people know that you are creating dope things, some of those things happen organically.
It's also important to recognize that, at events like GenCon, if you go to a publisher like Renegade, a large portion of their team is here this weekend. Marketing folks, their sales folks, all of those people. So if there are groups in particular that you want to work with, walk up and say, hey, I'm such and such. I'd really love to meet whoever is doing your creative direction. You're going to have to pretend a little bit before you feel comfortable doing that. But, walking into a room like you're supposed to be there is really the biggest piece of advice that I can give you.
Because you are. You are supposed to be there.
You're literally here.
Yeah.
Hey.
You are supposed to be there. Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I'll say, if I can. I would recommend that those who have the capacity and the time and the, what do you call that? Mental space? Yeah, that's what it is. To do so, become a project manager. Because there is like a desert of people in the project management space. And as soon as like one sprouts up in the earth, and then everybody just like swoops down, and there's like 20 people trying to get it. That's a bad analogy.
No, but it's accurate though. It's accurate.
It is true. I know maybe 3 top flight project managers.
Yeah.
Like in totality. So.
Yeah. And really, this space needs more of them.
Yeah.
This space needs more really good project managers.
Those are the people that like wrangle all the creatives. They're like, no, get in here, get this deadline done.
It is that. I mean, for me, the bigger picture I can look, the more effective I am. The more I have to come down into minutia, the less effective I become. That's just how my brain works. So when there's things that I'm like, somebody else have the spreadsheet?
Yeah, somebody else has the spreadsheet. Call Dawn. I love spreadsheets.
I'll do all the spreadsheets.
I was going to say, yeah, Diana. Yeah, me too. Okay.
She does love spreadsheets.
I'm the same way. I don't know why. I just have this weird. I don't know. I like being in charge.
But
I'll do them all for you. Contact me, Diana DiMicco spreadsheet queen, adding that to
yeah, adding it to the resume.
Yeah.
Step
I
on
will
the
say, I did
spreadsheet.
start out as a hobbyist, right? I started off with a full-time corporate job for 10 years, and I was always posting on social media and networking and stuff. And once you start looking at maybe job listings of something like the community manager, what you've been doing for the past 3, 4, 5 years as a hobbyist, as a freelancer, you're like, oh, I've done that. So don't discount that. I went from corporate health and wellness to marketing and community management. So a huge career leap. I don't have formal education in marketing or anything. So look at those job listings and be like, oh, I have this and this, but maybe I don't have project management. What can I do? Can I hop onto a stream team? Can I help manage projects? And look at those things that if you are looking to get into a full-time gig with sales or marketing, be on the lookout to how can I get those experiences to do those, boost those resumes.
Let me tell you, just to add to that, I mean, you're all in sales and marketing right now. So start learning these skills and applying them to you right now. That's part of the reason why I succeeded, is that was my background. I was a corporate exec in marketing and all this other business. So I was able to apply those skills to me. So when you're building you, that is also showing other people that you know how to build things. And I mean, like, a lot of my work with WotC, like Black Dice Society, came as a direct extension of my Patreon. I was running about 35, 40 games a month, and I knew everybody over there, and they were like, hey, so you tell vampire stories, right? I'm like, I do. And they were like, you know a thing about D&D also? I'm like, go on. And they were like, well, we need help launching Ravenloft, and that's how this happened. And it's just because they knew is what I was doing.
I think it would be valuable for everybody here, because no one starts off as a freelancer, right? Like, we all kind of fell into it or dove into it head first. What did you do before this?
Yes. Oh, is that a question?
Yeah, I want to know.
Before this, I have a degree in media and performing arts, and I have a master's degree in business.
I have my bachelor's in public health and my master's in exercise science.
I have an English degree. I was a bodyguard. And then I had my own business. Then I went into corporate America. Go to my LinkedIn. It's all true. And then this.
I was a bank manager for about 10 years, and my degree's in psychology, so not TTRPGs.
It's kind of is TTRPG.
Psychological horror is a little different than what they teach you to do when you're like training to help people, but it's fine. It's, opposites, I guess.
I was in the Marine Corps, I was in infantryman, I was a recruiter, I was a martial arts instructor, I was a swim instructor, I did like a bunch of stuff,
So you're definitely the coolest of all of us. You're definitely the coolest of all of us.
I'll say that.
I would. He's a All right, we've got enough time for maybe one more question before I want to kind of wrap. And I see a hand. Yes, perfect.
Is there a substantive difference between balancing parenting with freelancing and balancing parenting with conventional?
First of all, is that a wild Keith Amon over there? Keith Amon, that man is brilliant. You should buy all of his books. The monsters know what they're doing. The monsters still know what they're doing. Live to tell the tale. Buy all of Keith Amon's books. He is brilliant. Am I the only one up here with kids?
I believe. I was about to say I do not want to opt out of this one.
Back. This ain't my thing.
I think that I would answer more globally. There is only one thing in the whole world that every human being is equal in, and that is time. We all have 168 hours in a week. We're different shapes, sizes, income brackets, intelligence levels, but we've all got that. So there is time for everything if you manage it properly. There may not be time over the course of every day, but there is over every week or over every 2 weeks. And people will say things like, it's not all the same because I've already got a job and I got kids and I got that. I'm like, well, you've already just spent 140 of your hours, but you got the same resources as everybody else. For me, I make a point that I try to, part of the reason why I got the house I got is because I have a detached guest house. That's my studio, so I can see the kids more often. I try to always have dinner with them. If I know they're coming home from school, I will at least stop what I'm doing to come in and say, hi, hello, how are you? How was your day? It might only be 10 minutes, but at least there's a moment where you make eye contact and it's like, you have my full attention. I love you. Now I'm gonna go finish doing what I gotta do to keep all this lights and water on, so yeah.
Daddy's gotta go kill some people.
Honestly, that's the thing. They know what this is.
For me, I started to schedule my time with my kids. I didn't tell them that, but schedule so that I would get into the habit of it because I live by my schedule pretty much. So there's that, and then there's also important to remember that it's not the amount of time that you spend with your children, it's the quality of the time.
Yep.
So if you only have 10 minutes, like they were saying, that's an awesome 10 minutes that you spend with your kids. And I flip them around, whatever I do. Make sure that you're qualified to flip them around.
Exactly. Don't just sit like children. I will just say, just also as an article of faith, anytime the kids come talk to me, even if I'm busy, I always make a point to take my hands off the keyboard and look them in the eye. Even if I have to say I don't have time right now, but can we talk about this later? I'm never just like, because that's what really hurts.
Yeah.
Okay. I hate this because this conversation's been so enlightening. We are rounding out here in our last 10 minutes, and the sign out front says we have to give the room up. So, some fresh reminders for all of you, right? Diversify your income streams. Figure out your value and your goals. Go ahead and get a contract together. Recognize that you have a place in this space no matter where you're at in your freelancing career, and what success looks like is on you. What does success look like for you? And then recognize that when it comes to networking, at least the conversation that I heard is networking is a two-way street. You can't just walk in and expect somebody to lift you up into a position, but networking also requires that you have something to offer them. And then be brave, everybody. No is not a bad word. It's just a no. And there will always be another chance, or maybe that's just not the right project. So thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to let our panelists go back down, tell you where they can find them when they're not here, and we'll grab tickets. I'm going to kind of be at the back of the door to grab tickets for everybody. Thank you for in the back for the reminder. And I hope you have an absolutely fantastic GenCon. If you want to hear more about freelancing or more about Kobold, this afternoon we have an hour with Wolfgang Bauer, who started Kobold Press off of a live journal. So if you want to come hear about his story and learn everything.
Live journal?
Yeah.
Like the website?
Yeah, you didn't know that?
I did not know that.
All of Kobold Press was started. Kobold Press was started off of a tip jar on live journal.
Wow.
So if you want to come hear about how Wolfgang literally started as a freelancer and built the company that he has today, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, and that may be another great chance for some good questions. So.
Sorry, I brought like the emo kid trauma.
Yeah, you got so excited.
You found my life. You can find me all over the internet at Brutal Dan. I'm also in the BIPOC Lounge all day long, 240, or I guess it's just down that way.
Yeah.
So come hang out. We have drinks, refreshments, and all that. Again, I'm the community manager for Roll20, and I freelance as the community director for FreeRPGs. So I do have experience. If you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out.
B. Dave Walters all over the interwebs at B. Dave Walters on Twitter. My DMs are open, so if you have any more questions, anything you want to talk about, just hit me up.
Diana DiMicco, you can find me on the Renegade Games channel currently, and if you ever need dice, come to Die Hard Dice. That's where I am. Hi.
I'm Friday. You can find me either on Start Playing Games if you want to play a game with me, or on Twitter IsFriday TV, IsFriday TV.
And Friday does great Twitter rants on business and breaks. So, you know, top notch. Got to get on it. Thank you, everybody. I'm Dot. Make sure to drop by the Kobold Press booth, 1855, and I'll grab some tickets at the back. Thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful afternoon.